presidency and the ANC now say that South Africa will remain a signatory to the Rome Statute following mixed messages in the last 24 hours. The ANC's first Deputy Secretary General, Nomvula Mokonyane, says while the ANC wants to remain part of the International Criminal Court system, the body needs to reform urgently. That's after a warrant of arrest was issued for the Russian President Vladimir Putin over crimes committed during his country's invasion of Ukraine. Putin was meant to visit South Africa for the BRICS summit to be held in August, and at this stage, it's still not clear if he will actually come, and if he does, whether local officials will hand him over.
The ANC at its 55th National Conference rescinded the decision of pulling out of the ICC. So that resolution still stands. In our last discussions at the ANC Lekgotla, including in the last NAC we've had over this weekend, one of the things that has been looked at is we need to look at the amendment of the resolution of 2002 that is domesticated, related to the Roman Statute. That then gives South Africa an opportunity of not making that statute mandatory in terms of implementation to our own situation based on national interest. There's an experience of what has happened in the United Kingdom. There is also an option of us entering into a bilateral arrangement with a country that we have an interest in terms of relating to. So the NEC has assigned ANC deployees to go and look at various options that may actually help the African National Congress and the country in realizing our own national interests with regard to many things, including, amongst others, the hosting of the coming BRICS summit.
Let's talk more about this now with constitutional law expert Cathy Powell. Cathy, a very good evening to you. Grateful for your time. So a confusing past few hours. The president misspeaking, according to his office, by saying that indeed South Africa was going to withdraw as a signatory to the Rome Statute. Nomvula Mokonyane from the party's NEC now says, you know, they're not withdrawing, but one of the proposals on the table is perhaps a call for reform and maybe a tweaking of how this could all work. Is it really all that flexible?
It's certainly not as flexible as she has just suggested in the clip that you played. There is no national interest exception in the Rome Statute. You're either a party or you're not. The only grey area, which is relevant in this case, is that the ICC itself is not supposed to issue an instruction to states that forces states to not to comply with their obligations towards third-party states, and that can include obligations of state immunity. And there is a question in this case of whether Putin, as head of state of the Russian Federation, would be entitled to that. There is some case law to suggest he isn't, but there is also some case law, including that of the International Court of Justice, to say that that state immunity continues between states even when we're talking about international crimes. That's the only grey area. There's no grey area for national interest.
And just on the issue of national interest, is it fair to say that at some point when you look at any country, whether it proclaims itself as a democracy and a country that wants to play everything by the law, if you look close enough, every country has made friends with someone who is either an accused warlord, a criminal, or, as is happening now, is wanted by the ICC. So this is not an entirely unique situation, is it?
It's not unique, but it is unusual in that, yes, like other countries, like some other countries, we've made friends with suspected international criminals, war criminals in this case. But at the same time, we're also party to a treaty that we signed willingly, under which we agreed to surrender such people to the ICC. So it's not enough to say, oh, well, you know, every country has to make some sort of deal with the devil every now and then. This country has to be speaking with one voice when it does so. You can't sign the Rome Statute just to make yourself look good and then not actually carry out on the obligations. And as much as there is a question mark over whether the ICC should have issued the warrant of arrest binding on South Africa right now. It has done so, and South Africa, as long as it is a party to the Rome Statute, is therefore under an obligation to comply with that warrant of arrest.
And South Africa has had experience with this issue before. Omar al-Bashir, he was wanted on an international arrest warrant, came to the country, was allowed. He stayed, I think, for a few hours at best, and then flew back to Sudan. And then a court later confirmed that the authorities in this country had erred in the way in which they handled that situation. Now we're back to talking about South Africa, whether it's going to remain as a signatory to the Rome Statute or not. And it appears that the conversation only becomes important at a time when an ally, a friend, is due to visit. And in the times in between, serious steps are not being taken to either actually decide whether the country is staying or going.
Exactly. It's lackadaisical, and South Africa, even if it chooses to withdraw, must now do so and actually nail its colours to the mast. What has happened is that the country has stayed a party to the Rome Statute. It has claimed the moral high ground that this affords, but it doesn't want to pay the price for that moral high ground. If you are a party to a statute under which you agree to either prosecute or surrender serious crimes such as war crimes, and we're dealing here with the deportation of children, then I'm afraid you have to do it. And it's not enough to wake up just at that moment when the President of Russia wants to visit South Africa. South Africa did, or the ANC did, after the al-Bashir debacle, say that it wanted to withdraw from the Rome Statute. And in fact, at an executive level, the step was taken to withdraw, because the Rome Statute does allow for withdrawal. But the court found that the permission of Parliament had to be sought, and at that point the whole thing was abandoned. The permission of Parliament could still be sought, but then they must get going. And perhaps it's worth saying here that even if they were to withdraw from the Rome Statute, whatever obligations South Africa is under now remain valid. So then we're not getting out of the Putin arrest by withdrawing now.
One of the guests we spoke to earlier was saying that the process to withdraw would take up to at least a year in order to complete, and the BRICS summit, which Putin may or may not attend in South Africa, that's due to roll around in August of this year. So there's not enough time to withdraw in time for Putin to arrive in South Africa without potential consequences. How complicated a process is withdrawal from the Rome Statute?
It's actually quite simple. You merely indicate that you wish to withdraw, and in 1 year it takes effect. The complications for us come from our domestic law, because the court has held that for those treaties which require ratification by Parliament to join, there's also some level of approval by Parliament that's required to withdraw from those treaties. So because Parliament has accepted the Rome Statute and indeed enacted it into domestic law, Parliament has to be involved and has to accept the withdrawal of South Africa from the treaty. Once that's done, all the executive has to do is to tell the International Criminal Court we're leaving, and a year later that will take effect.
And is the concept of the International Criminal Court as it stands, is that outdated given the multiple misgivings from whichever region of the world you look to at the moment?
I think it's more relevant than ever because of the amount of armed conflict that's springing up all over the country, all over the globe. So I think it's very important. It also becomes politically more costly to stick to it. But perhaps it's at this time, exactly at this time, when states have to make a stand and pay the price for actually upholding international criminal justice rather than political convenience.
Cathy Powell, good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time.